is one of my favorite things in the whole wide world!
Oh boy, it's Buck Wild all over again. Before I dig into this dumpster fire of a sequel, let me give you 3 things that would be a better use of your time to watch than this. Dune 2, which I just saw in theaters recently, I wasn't super crazy about the first movie while acknowledging it was still pretty well made, but this second movie really won me over. It does hit a lot of the familiar Chosen One story beats, but it does so in such an inspired, beautiful, and surprisingly spiritual way that it's hard not to be engaged with the screenplay. Iwaju is Disney's first collab with an African animation studio, Kugali, about a superpowered lizard protecting a girl from an evil thug in future Nigeria, and it's surprisingly well done. It's nicely animated and doesn't shy away from darker elements like class separation and even prejudice. What a fitting allegory for the ridiculous reception to this show. Orion in the Dark, ironically also made by DreamWorks, is a heartwarming story about friendship, being brave, and a good little commentary on the passing of stories through generations. It doesn't talk down to its audience and has some surprisingly meaningful things to say. And while you're at it, why not watch Across the Spider-Verse again for the 50th time? It never gets old, unlike studios need to half-heartedly reboot nostalgia. Now to the review. Of all the hate for the first trailer of this sequel, I probably had the most subdued reaction to it. And because I really don't want to spend any more time talking about this train wreck of a revival than I have midterms this week. I'm just going to run through the main points of why this movie was a completely, utterly abysmal failure. Number 1, the animation. DreamWorks Animation, especially its TV division, has had a bit of trouble with their animation lately. There's been a lot of talk on them outsourcing their animation to Sony Pictures Imageworks, which, not gonna lie, looking at the Spider-Verse movies, could be good. It's just not something I'm really gun-ho for either. A big part of what makes individual studios special is that they create their own animation, especially when their animation as of late has been awesome. Even Orion in the Dark, who I commend for having a more 2D approach, did have some moments where it felt kinda cheap, and that's probably mostly due to Micros animating it, not DreamWorks. Now, Megamind 2 isn't really the product of outsourcing, no, it's mostly just the product of lower budgeting and probably not giving animators the time or resources they need to do their best work, which I unfortunately learned when an animator who worked on the most recent Kung Fu Panda show commented on one of my videos and said the entire series was just made in one go. Yup, barely any time to make the animation look, well, barely decent. Looking back, you know why All Hail King Julian's animation actually looked kinda smooth and natural, and most of DreamWorks' newer shows just don't? Because there was like a year in between each season for King Julian, whereas for most new DreamWorks shows, it's like 1 to 3 months. That's not nearly enough time to make the animation look polished. Once again, I feel like I talked about everything but the actual movie, which as you'd expect looks pretty crappy. Texture, heck even lighting wise, it looks mostly decent, but it's the character movements and animation that leave a lot to be desired. Nobody's movements look even remotely natural or smooth, and because I'm feeling petty, let's once again compare it to the TV show that did it right. This looks and feels natural, the characters move freely, and it exudes tons of energy. This does not. And to make matters worse, this came out years before this did. The movements constantly feel janky and disjointed. I mean, just look at this. Also, there's just a general lack of frames all around. I find your lack of frames disturbing. And putting motion blur over already unnatural animation doesn't make it look better, it just looks even more off-putting. The sad thing is, I can tell there was some amount of creativity put into a couple of these sequences, but again, because the animation is so stilted, it's hard to actually execute these ideas well. Better on paper than on screen. And was I the only one who noticed that they kept on using extras from the Boss Baby show? Like, seriously? Needless to say, this is a huge downgrade from the first movie. And this got a 4K HDR release? The first movie doesn't even have a 4K release, and it looks a gazillion times better than this. Number 2, the script and story, which, big shock, is also very lackluster. Basically, Megamind tries to keep a group of his former villain friends, the Doom Syndicate, from dominating Metro City, which totally doesn't mess up his backstory from the first movie, where he didn't really have any friends besides Minion, who was renamed Chum in this movie, and spends a majority of it away from Megamind because he doesn't feel appreciated. Didn't we do this already in the first film? Which brings up another big flaw. Almost all the main characters, especially Megamind, have totally lost all of their character development. Megamind is back to being a totally self-absorbed moron, though even more than he was at times in the first movie.
He wants to be your sidekick.
Sidekick? I'm the hero, you're the guy who gets to hang out with the hero.
Minion just isn't really willing to speak up for himself to Megamind, and Roxanne is fine, I guess. Roxanne. But she's way more of a plot device here than anything. Basically reduced to being Megamind's stand-in fiance / flunky because she's tired of being a reporter and apparently doesn't have anything else better to do. My girl was one of the most interesting dynamic characters in the first movie. How did she get reduced to this? So just like the animation, it goes without saying, everyone character-wise is very downgraded. Just like the humor, which the Doom Syndicate provides a majority of. They say or do something mildly amusing occasionally, especially the Night Guy.
Mind is back. Their sorrow will be delicious.
Put this character in a better movie, please, but overall they fall flat and are very forgettable as characters. I mean, it doesn't help that all of their character designs are stolen from much better ones. And did we really need this little irritating Gen Z firecracker to come in every 15 minutes to basically just remind us how popular influencing is for kids? Like, we get it, it's 2024, though I guess props for not making her an antagonist like most kids shows do nowadays. Being an influencer does not automatically equate to being evil. I mean, just look at me. Okay, bad example. Apparently this movie had the same writers as the first. Yeah, that does not always show because there are way more jokes that miss here than hit. I guess the last thing I'll talk about is the voice acting, which admittedly isn't terrible, but it's very obvious that Megamind is no longer being voiced by Will, who couldn't show up for this, but will show up for Despicable Me 4? You gotta be kidding me. It's probably better he wasn't a part of this dumpster fire though, just being honest. Minion and even Roxanne's voice replacements sound decent.
Let's face it, the kitchen staff is horrendous, new sir.
But we have to think of something before they do whatever this phase 2 thing is.
It just again is a shame they couldn't get any of the original cast to return. But I think it also just shows how much of a TV production this movie was overall. Nobody at DreamWorks thought a Megamind sequel would be worth giving big screen money and effort to, and that honestly stinks, especially considering how great the first movie was. So if you didn't already know, don't waste your time on this. I'm upset even now that I wasted my time on this. And looking at the cult reception of this movie, I don't think anybody is looking forward to the TV show that's supposed to follow this up. But what can I say? Life is often full of disappointments. 1.5 out of 5 Megamind bobbleheads.